I have to admit, when I started digging into this week's research stack, I was expecting a pep talk.
Right.
You know, the usual rah-rah, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing.
The standard resilience narrative.
Exactly. But instead, I found this mental image that is, and I'm not exaggerating, it's going to haunt me for a long time.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
It has to be. It's from Dr. Von der Wright, who's an orthopedic surgeon, and she describes being in the operating room, you know, standing over a patient, scalpel in hand.
It's already a very vivid scene.
It's terrifying. She says that when she operates on someone who has been sedentary, you know, someone who hasn't moved much, who hasn't put their body under any real stress, their bones feel like butter.
Butter. That is the word she uses. It's just, it's so visceral.
Literal butter. She says she can take a surgical screw and just push it into the bone with her thumb.
No drill.
No drill, no hammer. The structure just, it just gives way.
Oh.
But then she talks about operating on a patient who's fit. You know, someone who runs, jumps, lifts weights. And their bone is like hardwood.
A completely different material.
She says she has to use actual manual labor, like breaking a sweat, leaning her body weight into it just to get the screw to bite into the bone.
It's a slightly nauseating way to start a deep dive, isn't it?
A little bit.
But it perfectly frames the problem we're talking about today.
Yeah.
We tend to think of our bodies, especially our skeletons, as these like static things, like a coat hanger for your skin.
Right, it's just the frame, it's done growing.
But Dr. Wright is showing us that your body is a responsive material. It's either hardening like oak or softening like butter, and it's happening right now, depending entirely on the signals you give it.
And that really is the theme for today. We are looking at a massive stack of sources. I mean, we're talking cognitive science, orthopedic surgery, ancient philosophy, biohacking tech.
And even shoe design.
And even shoe design. And the mission here is to synthesize all of this into a kind of blueprint, not just for health and not just for being tough, but for resilience.
And we really, really need to define that word carefully. Resilience.
Yeah.
I think in the cultural lexicon, especially lately, it gets confused with endurance.
Yeah.
We think resilience just means standing in the storm, taking the beating, and just not dying.
Gritting your teeth until the bad thing goes away.
Right, the suck it up mentality. But if you look at the sources we have today, from the biology of bone density to the psychology of trauma resilience, isn't about hardness or stubbornness. It's about adaptability.
Okay.
It's not just surviving the crash. It's about how the system, whether that's your mind or your femur, recovers and restructures itself to be, ideally, better than it was before.
So it's not just bouncing back, it's bouncing forward.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And what I think sets this deep dive apart is that we are absolutely refusing to separate the two halves of the human experience.
The mind and the body.
Exactly. You cannot have a resilient, high-performing mind if it's housed in a collapsing vessel. And you can't have a high-performing body if your identity completely shatters the moment you hit a single roadblock.
So we have a lot to get through. We're going to find out why a famous shoe designer had to stare at a controversial building in Paris to save his company.
I love that story.
We're going to talk about why a little bit of delusion might actually be the healthiest thing for your marriage.
That's a provocative one.
And yes, we are definitely going to spend more time talking about how to make sure our bones don't turn into butter.
We're going to bounce between the metaphysical, like how you define your soul, and the very, very physical, like how much protein you need to eat so you don't wither away in a nursing home.
Okay, let's just jump right into the deep end then. The first major theme that kept popping up in the research, especially from the cognitive scientists, is this idea of identity. Specifically, what they call the trap of the what.
The trap of the what? This is such a fundamental error in how most of us construct our sense of self. In the West especially, we are just conditioned to attach our identity to a specific role.
Like a job title.
A job title, a hobby, a relationship status. I am a lawyer. I am a marathon runner. I am a parent. I am a podcaster.
And that works great, right? Until it doesn't.
Precisely. Because roles are inherently fragile. They are subject to external forces you can't control. Injuries happen.
Layoffs happen.
Kids grow up and leave the house. And if your entire self-worth, your entire map of who you are, is anchored to that one what, then when the what disappears, the self just collapses.
There is a heartbreaking but incredibly powerful story in the source material from Dr. Maya Shankar that illustrates this perfectly. She's a cognitive scientist now, but that was not the plan.
No, not at all. Her background is just fascinating. She was a prodigy, a violinist. And we aren't talking about someone who played in a high school band. She was studying under Isaac Perlman.
Oh, okay. So the master.
The master. She was on the fast track to being a world-class soloist. That
Yeah.
was her life. That was her entire world. That was her, what?
I can't even imagine the pressure of that, but also the certainty. She knew exactly who she was every single morning.
And then, at 15 years old, disaster strikes. She overextended a tendon in her hand while playing. It wasn't a car crash or some big dramatic explosion. It was just a mechanical failure in her own body
From doing the thing she loved.
from doing the thing she loved. And the doctors told her, you are done. You will never play at that level again.
15. That is just devastating.
It's catastrophic. And she talks about how she didn't just lose the instrument, she lost herself. She would look in the mirror and have no idea who was looking back at her if it wasn't Maya the violinist. The grief was total. It was an identity crisis in the most literal sense.
So how did she get out of that hole? I mean, she's obviously thriving now. She's a leading voice in her field.
Well, she had to undergo this massive cognitive shift. And it took time. She had to dig underneath the what to find the why.
The why.
She had to ask herself, what was it about the violin that I actually loved? Was it the wood and the strings? Was it the finger mechanics? The applause?
No. It had to be something deeper.
It was. She realized her core driver, her why, was emotional connection. She loved the ability to make an audience feel something, to forge a bond with a room full of strangers without speaking a single word.
That's the why, emotional connection.
Right. And once she isolated that variable emotional connection, she had this epiphany. She realized that the violin was just one vehicle for that. It was the vehicle she was good at, but it wasn't the only one in the world.
So she pivoted.
She pivoted. She went into cognitive science. She started a podcast where she tells stories. She found new ways to achieve that same why of creating connection.
It's like the violin was just the delivery mechanism, but she had mistakenly thought it was the product itself.
That's a brilliant way to put it. And this applies to everyone, not just child prodigies. There's another case study in the stack about a guy named Scott. He was a high-powered human rights lawyer.
Very intense. Very identity-driven job.
Absolutely. 80-hour weeks, high stakes, constant conflict. His what was being a litigator.
And then he gets long COVID.
Yes. And for anyone who knows about long COVID, it can be absolutely debilitating. Crushing brain fog, severe fatigue.
Fear.
He just couldn't sustain the pace anymore. He physically couldn't do the what.
And for a lot of people, especially high achievers, that's where the depression spiral begins. You feel useless because you can't perform your primary function.
But Scott did the same thing Maya did. He took a step back and looked for his why. Why did he become a lawyer in the first place? He realized his core value wasn't arguing in a courtroom. It was advocating for the underrepresented, fighting for people who didn't have a voice.
So the what of being a trial lawyer is gone, but the why of being an advocate is still there.
And that allowed him to pivot without shattering. He became an advocate for the long hauler community. He used his legal brain to fight for patient rights, for research funding, but in a way that his body could actually handle. The vehicle changed, but the driver remained the same.
This feels like such a critical tool for you, the listener. If you're worried about your job or you're facing a big life transition, you need to do this audit. Ask yourself, what is the underlying value? Is it problem solving? Is it helping people? Is it creativity? Because those things are portable. The job title isn't.
It's all about abstraction.
Yeah.
The more abstract your identity anchor is, the more resilient you are to the chaos of the world.
Yeah.
If you identify as a runner, a broken ankle destroys you.
Yeah.
But if you identify as someone who values movement and physical health, a broken ankle just means you switch to swimming for a few months. It's a logistical problem, not an existential crisis.
But let's be real for a second. Even with that mindset, a crisis still hurts. When you lose something you love, it hurts. And Maya Shankar had another story in the sources that really touched on how to handle that acute grief. This was the story about the surrogacy,
Yeah,
right?
this was heavy. Maya and her husband Jimmy were expecting twins via a surrogate. They were preparing the room, they were mentally ready to become parents, and then they got the call that the surrogate had miscarried, both twins.
That is just a sledgehammer to the heart. There's no other way to describe it.
Absolutely. And in that moment of just raw, overwhelming grief, while they are literally weeping, her husband did something that on the surface sounds almost callous, or at least wildly inappropriate. He asked her to list 5 things she was grateful for.
I think if someone did that to me in that exact moment, I might throw something at them. I'm in mourning. Don't tell me to be grateful. That feels so invalidating.
And she did resist.
Yeah.
She didn't want to do it. She felt like it was minimizing her pain, like he was trying to paper over the tragedy. But he pushed gently, and eventually, through the tears, She started listing things.
Like what?
Small things. I'm grateful to be an aunt. I'm grateful for my work. I'm grateful for you.
Okay, you have to explain the mechanism here, because this sounds a lot like toxic positivity. Just smile and it'll all go away.
It's definitely not that. This is a very specific cognitive exercise called self-affirmation. Here's the neuroscience behind it. When a massive part of your identity is under attack, in this case, her identity as a prospective mother, the brain tends to tunnel vision.
Right.
It creates a scarcity mindset. It feels like the entire map of yourself has been burned to the ground.
The feeling is, I have lost everything.
Exactly. The brain generalizes the specific loss to the whole self. But by forcing herself to list those other things, being an aunt, her work, her relationship, she was forcing her brain to widen the aperture. She was reminding her neural circuitry that the map is actually quite large. There are other territories on that map that are still green, still thriving.
So it doesn't take away the grief. The grief is still there. It's still real.
The grief is 100% real and valid. But this exercise prevents identity collapse. It keeps you from drowning in the feeling that I am nothing now. It stabilizes the foundation so you can actually process the grief without falling apart completely.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's shift gears a little bit. We've anchored our identity in the why, so we know who we are. But resilience is also about how we act in the world, especially when we are trying to do something new or scary. This brings us to the second segment, cognitive reframing.
And this is where we get into the difference between the spotlight and the flashlight.
I love this analogy. So most of us, when we walk into a high-stakes situation, a presentation, a first date, a big meeting, we suffer from imposter syndrome.
We feel like everyone is staring at us. That's the spotlight effect.
Hmm.
We are hyper-aware of our own flaws, our own nervousness, and we just assume everyone else is analyzing us with that same intensity. We think, do I look stupid? Do I belong here? They're going to find me out.
It's exhausting. You spend the whole time playing defense.
The research suggests we need to flip the switch. Turn off the spotlight, turn on the flashlight.
Meaning?
The spotlight shines on you. It's about performance and judgment. A flashlight shines out at the world. It's about discovery and curiosity. So when you shift your focus from how do I look to what can I discover here? How? The entire dynamic changes. If you walk into that meeting thinking, what problem can I help solve? What can I learn from this person? How? The anxiety plummets. You aren't the object of the exam anymore. You are the explorer.
And we have a perfect and really unexpected example of this from the world of sneakers. Tinker Hatfield. Now, I know the shoes, the Air Max, but I had no idea about the backstory.
It's legendary in design circles, and it's a perfect illustration of the flashlight concept. Tinker Hatfield was not a shoe designer. He was an architect. Nike hired him in the 80s to design office spaces and retail stores.
So he was an outsider in the shoe department?
A total outsider. He ends up in the shoe design room, and honestly, he was a bit of an imposter. He didn't know the first thing about cushioning or rubber density or, the biomechanics of foot strike.
And Nike was struggling at the time. This wasn't the giant they are today. They needed a hit.
They were desperate. The competition was eating their lunch. So Tinker is in Paris for work, and he goes to see the Pompidou Center.
Okay, I've seen pictures of this place. It's the building that looks like it's been turned inside out.
Exactly. It was incredibly controversial when it was built. The architects, Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers, designed it so that all the functional elements, the pipes, the heating ducts, the escalators, were on the outside of the building.
And painted in bright colors.
Right. Most architects try to hide the guts of the building behind a sleek facade. The Pompidou Center puts them on proud display.
So Tinker is standing there, looking at this architectural oddity. Most people would just see a weird building and move on.
But Tinker uses his flashlight, his
Yes.
architectural flashlight. He doesn't think, oh God, I'm a bad shoe designer. I don't know how to make shoes. Everyone's watching me. He thinks like an architect. He looks at those exposed pipes and has a revelation.
Which is?
He thinks, wait a minute, Nike has this amazing air technology, this little airbag in the sole, but they hide it. It's buried inside the foam. Why don't we do what this building does? Why don't we cut a hole in the side of the shoe and show the technology? Let's make the invisible visible.
Which sounds crazy at the time. Usually you hide the engineering to make it look sleek and magical.
And people at Nike thought he was completely insane. They told him he was going to get fired. They thought the bubble would pop or that it would look unfinished and cheap. But the Air Max 1 was born, the shoe with the visible air window. And it didn't just sell well. It saved the company.
And he only did it because he leaned into his unique perspective. He didn't try to be a normal shoe designer and hide his background. He used his architectural flashlight to solve a shoe problem.
That is the lesson. Imposter syndrome tells you to hide what makes you different so you can fit in. Resilience tells you to leverage what makes you different to solve the problem in a way that nobody else can.
Okay, that's huge for the professional side. But what if you're just scared? Not of being an imposter in a specific field, but just general social anxiety, the fear of looking dumb in public. The sources have a great strategy for this called microdosing bravery.
This comes from Dr. Shadeh Zarai, and it's based on a classic psychological principle called systematic desensitization. If you have a phobia of spiders, a good therapist doesn't throw a live tarantula on your face in the first session.
No, that would be counterproductive, to say the least.
You start small, you look at a cartoon of a spider, then maybe a photo, then a dead spider in a jar from across the room. You build up tolerance. Dr. Zarai applies this exact principle to social bravery.
So how do we do this? What's the cartoon spider of social interaction?
She suggests starting with incredibly low-stakes interactions. Talk to your Uber driver. Don't just sit in silence. Just ask, how is your day going? Or ask a barista, what's your favorite drink to make?
That feels manageable. The risk is basically zero.
It's a contained environment. You'll likely never see that person again. The stakes are non-existent. But every time you do it, you get a little dopamine hit that says, I spoke up and I didn't die. The world didn't end. That's your 10-milligram dose of bravery.
And then you gradually scale up from there.
Exactly. The next week, maybe you ask a question in a small team meeting. Then a month later, maybe you present one slide. You are systematically inoculating yourself against the fear of rejection by exposing yourself to manageable doses of social discomfort.
I love that. And there's a related concept here from Ed Catmull, one of the founders of Pixar.
Yeah.
He talks about ugly babies.
This is so reassuring for anyone who does any kind of creative work, which is pretty much everyone in some capacity. We look at a movie like Toy Story or Finding Nemo, and we think it came out of the womb perfect. A pristine masterpiece.
Right. We see the polished final product, and we assume the process was just as polished.
And Catmull says, absolutely not. He says early versions of Pixar movies suck. That's his word. He calls them ugly babies. They are awkward, the story doesn't work, the animation is rough, the jokes don't land, they are a mess.
But they don't kill the baby just because it's ugly.
No, they nurture it, they protect it. They understand that you have to protect the ugly baby and feed it and fix it and let it grow until it becomes a masterpiece. The lesson is that you have to get comfortable with the ugly baby phase of any project, a report, a business, a piece of art. If you judge your early work against someone else's finished product, you'll quit every single time.
So the actionable tip here, and I'm definitely going to try this, is what some people call the daily dabble. Spend just 10 minutes a day doing something you are actively bad at.
Oh, I like that.
Play a new instrument badly. Learn a language and mispronounce everything. Just to prove to your ego that the world doesn't end when you suck at something.
It keeps the ego pliable. It desensitizes you to failure, which is the only way to eventually succeed.
Okay, so we've anchored our identity, we've reframed our fear, we've worked on the software. Now, we absolutely have to talk about the hardware. Because as Dr. Von der Wright said at the top, you can have the most resilient mindset in the world. But if your bones are made of butter, you're in serious trouble.
This brings us to segment 3, building the physical vessel. And really, skeletal health is the absolute foundation of longevity. We tend to obsess over muscle, which is important, and our cardiovascular system, but we ignore the scaffolding that holds it all up. And that is a fatal error.
Let's go back to that butterbone image for a second. Why does that actually happen? What is the biological mechanism?
It comes down to something called Wolff's Law. This is 19th century science that still holds up perfectly. The law states that bone in a healthy person or animal will adapt to the loads under which it is placed. Bone is not inert. It's living tissue. It's constantly breaking down and building up in a process called remodeling.
So it's literally use it or lose it.
It's the ultimate use it or lose it system. If you sit at a desk all day and never impact the ground, your body is incredibly efficient. It says, well, I don't need to waste precious energy and minerals maintaining expensive, dense bone here. Let's recycle those resources for something else. And the bone gets porous. That's the butter.
So what's the prescription? Because I do not want butter bones. Dr. Wright has a very simple one.
It's shockingly simple. Jumping. She prescribes jumping 20 times a day.
Just 20 times? It sounds way too easy.
It's not about cardio or burning calories. It's about the impact force. When you land from a jump, you send a jolt, a shock wave, through the skeleton, specifically up the long bones of your legs and into your hip.
Okay.
That shock wave is a direct signal to the osteoblasts, those are the bone-building cells, to get to work. It screams at them, hey, we're under structural threat down here. Reinforce the walls. Lay down more calcium matrix.
That is so actionable. You can do that while waiting for your coffee to brew. But you also have to give the body the actual bricks to build that reinforcement. And that means protein.
This is where most people, especially as they age, are failing spectacularly. The general rule of thumb from the sources is 1 gram of protein per pound of your ideal body weight.
Which is a lot. If you weigh 150 pounds, that's 150 grams of protein. That's not just a yogurt for breakfast and a small chicken salad for lunch. You have to actively hunt for protein all day.
It requires real intention. But here is the critical nuance that most people miss completely. It's not just about the amount of protein. It's about the quality and digestibility. We have some fascinating data on this from Dr. Paul Moken.
This is the DIAS score, right?
Correct. The Digestible Indispensable Amino Acid Score. It basically says, not all protein is created equal. You can eat 20 grams of protein from a plant source, say wheat or peas, and 20 grams from an egg. On the package label, they look identical. 20-gram protein.
But inside your body, it's a totally different story.
Drastically different. Because of the amino acid profile and the presence of anti-nutrients in many plants, your body might only be able to absorb and utilize 50% or 60% of that plant protein, whereas the protein from an egg or dairy, you're absorbing and using close to 98% of it.
There was that study in the Netherlands about this that was pretty shocking.
Yeah, in a nursing home. It's a sobering story. They looked at the diet of the elderly residents. On paper, according to the nutrition charts, they were hitting their protein goals. The dietitians are signing off on it. Patient is eating 70 grams of protein per day.
But physically, they were wasting away?
They were malnourished. They were losing muscle mass at an alarming rate, a condition called sarcopenia. Because the protein sources were cheap, low-quality, low bioavailability plant-based fillers. So even though they were eating enough, their bodies weren't getting the critical leucine signal needed to repair muscle and bone.
So the takeaway for you is prioritize high-DIAS foods. Eggs, dairy, lean meats. If you're plant-based, you can't just match the grams on the label. You have to eat more to get the same net effect, or be really smart about combining different sources to get a complete amino acid profile.
Correct. You have to overcome that digestibility deficit.
Now, there's a specific note here for women, particularly regarding menopause and bone health. And it involves a supplement that I, for one, usually associate with gym bros in tank tops.
Creatine. And you're right, it has a locker room reputation. It's seen as a muscle-building supplement for young men. But the research from Dr. Darren Kandow is completely changing that narrative. He did a 2-year study specifically on postmenopausal women.
Why that specific demographic?
Because when estrogen drops during menopause, bone density can just fall off a cliff. It's a rapid decline. That's when the risk for osteoporosis and hip fractures skyrockets. So he gave these women 11 grams of creatine daily and had them do resistance training.
And the results?
They preserved bone strength at the hip, which is the most critical fracture zone for older women. And, very importantly, there were 0 negative kidney or liver side effects, which is a common myth about creatine.
So how does it work? Is it just that it helps build more muscle, which then pulls on the bone and makes it stronger?
That's part of it, for sure. But creatine is also a fundamental energy recycler in your cells. It helps regenerate ATP, which is the cell's energy currency. By giving the cells a surplus of energy, they can perform the very expensive metabolic task of maintaining and building dense bone. It's a longevity tool, not just a bodybuilding one.
Fascinating. So jump, eat high-quality protein, and consider creatine. The chassis is built.
Now moving on to segment 4, we're going to get a little more high-tech here. Biohacking and personalization, because just eating healthy is a very vague and often wrong piece of advice.
It is. And what we are learning more and more is that there is no universal healthy diet. Individual biology varies wildly.
The story of Laura Lewington, the tech journalist, perfectly illustrates this. She decided to wear a continuous glucose monitor, or a CGM.
These are those little patches you stick on the back of your arm. They have a tiny filament that measures the glucose in your interstitial fluid, tracking your blood sugar 24/7. Originally for diabetics, but now biohackers are using them to see how specific foods affect them in real time.
So Laura's trying to be healthy. She makes a green juice, the kind kale, spinach, cucumber, the holy trinity of health. She drinks it down. And what happens?
Her blood sugar spikes through the roof. It was her biggest glucose spike of the day. Worse than a candy bar she had later.
Wait, from kale? How is that biological possible? There's barely any sugar in it. It's the delivery method. When you juice something, you pulverize the cell walls and you remove all the fiber.
Mm.
You are stripping away the very matrix that is designed to slow down digestion. So even those from green vegetables, the small amount of sugar hits your bloodstream all at once like a fire hose.
But here's the kicker. She eats ice cream after a full dinner, and her blood sugar barely moves. It's a flat line.
That feels deeply unfair, doesn't it?
It feels wrong.
But it makes sense mechanically.
Mm.
The fat and protein in the ice cream and in the dinner she ate before it dramatically blunted the sugar absorption. Or maybe it's just her unique gut microbiome handling dairy fat well. We don't know for sure.
But the point is, without that data from the CGM, she would have kept drinking that healthy juice every morning, thinking she was being virtuous, while actually spiking her insulin and creating inflammation.
Exactly. Personalization beats generalization. You have to test, not guess.
Now, let's talk about another biohack. Red light therapy. And we have to talk about Dave Asprey here. He's always pushing the envelope. He shared a story about a go-kart accident he was in.
A really nasty one. He got severe whiplash. And having had whiplash before, he knew the drill. It usually took him a full year to completely recover from the neck pain and stiffness.
But this time, he tried something different.
He used a veterinary red light device. These are powerful LED panels that emit very specific wavelengths of light, usually 660 nanometers, which is visible red, and 850 nanometers, which is near infrared. He shone it on his neck for a few minutes each day. He says he could literally feel the muscles uncoil. He recovered in 2 weeks.
Okay, let's pause there. How does that work? Is it just a glorified heat lamp? Is it a placebo?
No, it's not heat. This is a well-studied mechanism called photobiomodulation. The mechanism is fascinating. Inside your mitochondria, the power plants of your cells, there's an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase. This specific enzyme is uniquely sensitive to those wavelengths of red and near-infrared light.
So the light photons physically hit the enzyme?
And it essentially kicks the mitochondria into a higher gear. It kickstarts the production of ATP. It basically gives the cell a massive surplus of energy. And when a cell has more energy, it can do its job better, in this case, repairing damaged tissue and reducing inflammation. It's like jump-starting a car battery for your cells.
So it's just helping the body do its natural healing process, but faster and more efficiently.
Precisely.
But Asprey also warns us about the flip side of technology, EMFs, electromagnetic fields. And he has a very specific and, frankly, scary warning about cell phones.
This one made me check my own pockets immediately after I read it. He used to carry his cell phone in his right cargo pocket all day, every day, for years.
Which millions of us do.
He got a DEXA scan, which is the gold standard for measuring bone density. And the scan showed his bone density was 15% lower in his right femur, exactly where the phone always sat.
15%, that's a huge difference. Is that just a coincidence?
Asprey argues it's not. Now, the science on this is still debated, but the theory is that the low-level non-ionizing radiation from the phone's antenna creates a stress response in the cells, or interferes with the electrical signaling of the osteoblasts we talked about earlier.
The takeaway is simple, though. Regardless of the exact mechanism, distance matters.
Right. It follows the inverse square law of physics. Every inch you move the phone away from your body, the radiation exposure drops exponentially. So put it in a bag, put it on the desk next to you, just get it off your physical body.
One more thing in this biohacking section, brain health. We all want to avoid dementia. We want to stay sharp as we age. The ACTIV study gives us a very specific clue on how to do that.
This was a massive 20-year randomized trial, a really robust study. They looked at 3 different types of brain training. Memory training, like memorizing lists. Reasoning training, like solving logic puzzles. And speed of processing training.
You'd think the memory training would be the best for preventing memory loss, right?
You would. It makes intuitive sense. But it wasn't. The memory and reasoning training didn't have a significant long-term effect on dementia rates, but the speed of processing training reduced dementia risk by about 25%.
Why speed? What's so special about speed?
Because speed is a proxy for the overall efficiency and integrity of your entire neural network. To process something fast, like seeing a bird flash across a screen and identifying it in a split second, your brain has to recruit massive amounts of real estate across different hemispheres and fire them in perfect synchrony. It's like high-intensity interval training for the brain, not just slow, steady-state cardio.
So don't just do leisurely crossword puzzles.
No, play a video game. Or do one of those brain training apps that forces you to react under a time crunch. Watch the tempo.
All right, let's move from the brain down to the gut. Segment 5, we're talking digestion, food noise, and some more controversial ideas about detox. Let's start with the acid test. This is one of those things that just flips conventional wisdom completely on its head.
It really does. If you have heartburn or acid reflux, what's the immediate assumption?
Too much acid. My stomach is a volcano. I need to put the fire out. Pass the Tums.
But Dr. Amy Myers and a lot of other functional medicine experts argue that for many people, especially as they get older, heartburn is caused by low stomach acid.
Okay, that makes absolutely no sense. If I have low acid, why does it burn my esophagus?
It's a mechanical issue. There's a valve at the top of your stomach called the lower esophageal sphincter, or LES. Its job is to snap shut when food enters the stomach to keep the acid where it belongs.
Okay, like a little door.
Exactly. But here's the key. That valve, that little door, is triggered by acidity. It needs a highly acidic environment in the stomach to get the signal to close tightly. If your stomach acid is weak, a condition called hypochlorhydria, the valve gets a weak signal. It stays floppy. It stays partially open.
So the acid, even though it's weak, splashes up into the esophagus.
Precisely.
Mm.
And your esophagus is delicate tissue. It's not designed to handle acid of any strength. So even that weak acid burns it. You feel the burn, you assume too much acid, you take an antacid.
And you neutralize the acid even more, making the valve even floppier next time.
You enter a vicious cycle of maldigestion. You aren't breaking down your protein properly, you risk bacterial overgrowth, and you become dependent on the meds that are actually worsening the root cause.
So what's the test? How can you know if this is you?
It involves a supplement called betaine HCl with pepsin. The protocol is to take one pill with a protein-heavy meal. If you feel nothing, no warmth, no burn, it suggests your acid was low because you just added more acid and all it did was help you digest.
So you keep adding.
Right. You increase by one pill per meal until you feel a slight warmth or mild discomfort in your stomach. That's your limit. Then you back off by one pill, and that's your maintenance dose for meals with protein. It helps you actually digest your food and get the signal right for that valve.
Fascinating. Now, let's pivot to something very current. Weight loss drugs. GLP-1 agonists. Ozempic, Wegovy. The conversation around this is usually pretty heated.
It's always framed around vanity or cheating. But the source story from Ashley Koff, who's a dietitian, offers a much more compassionate and, I think, useful angle. She gained weight suddenly at 48 due to uterine fibroids, and she decided to use a GLP-1, but not just to get skinny.
She talks about using it to stop food noise. Can you explain what that is?
I think a lot of people can relate to this, even if they don't have a name for it. It's the constant obsessive background hum in your brain about food. What's for lunch? Did I eat too much? Is there chocolate in the drawer? I shouldn't eat that. Maybe just one bite. It's an exhausting mental loop.
It takes up so much bandwidth, so much cognitive energy.
Ashley said that when she was on the medication for the first time in her adult life, her brain just felt normal. The noise stopped. It was silence.
And that quiet allowed her to actually build healthy habits.
That is the absolute key. She used the drug as a tool to calm the overwhelming biological signaling, so she could finally do the psychological work of building new habits around food without fighting a constant internal battle. Then she weaned off the drug.
It reframes the drug completely. It's not a magic pill. It's a pair of noise-canceling headphones for your appetite, giving you the quiet space you need to fix the underlying behavior.
It views the struggle with weight not as a moral failing, but as a biological signaling error, which is a huge and important shift in perspective.
Okay, we are heading into the final stretch now, segment 6. We need to talk about wisdom. We've fixed the body. We've hacked the biology. Now we need to feed the soul.
And for this, we're going way back in time. To Zeno, the founder of Stoicism.
Another guy who lost everything he had.
A shipwreck. He was a wealthy merchant. His entire fortune was in cargo on a ship that sank. He washed up in Athens with nothing. He went to the Oracle of Delphi, as one did back then, and asked the big question, how do I live a good life?
And the Oracle gave him a very creepy, very cryptic answer.
Have conversations with the dead.
Which sounds like she was telling him to go hold a seance.
But Zeno interpreted it correctly and metaphorically. It meant read the classics, read the people who lived and thought and suffered before you.
He went to a bookstore, picked up Xenophon's writings about Socrates, and it completely changed the course of his life.
The lesson is so profound. Don't rely on trial and error for everything. You don't have enough time in one life to make every mistake yourself. Learn from the people who already made them. Resilience is about leveraging the accumulated wisdom of the past.
That connects beautifully to the idea of the second brain. We have a source anecdote about Ronald Reagan, and regardless of your politics, the man was known as the great communicator.
He was. He always had the perfect story, the perfect anecdote, the perfect joke for any situation. People thought he was just naturally folksy and charming, but the sources reveal he was a meticulous, almost obsessive note-taker.
He kept index cards.
Thousands of them. In his pockets, at his desk. He wrote down quotes he liked, stories he heard, statistics he found interesting. He organized them by theme. That was his second brain. He didn't rely on his own fallible memory in a high-pressure moment. He prepared.
He externalized his knowledge so he could access it under pressure.
And in the age of information overload we live in, this is an essential survival skill. You cannot keep it all in your head. Write it down. Organize it digitally or physically. Your resilience, in many ways, depends on your ability to access the right information when you need it most.
One last relationship hack before we close out. This one is from Dr. Andrew Huberman, and it's about the power of positive delusion.
I love this one. Feels like a validation for all the romantics out there.
Usually we think of delusion as a bad thing. We want to see reality clearly.
But in the context of a long-term romantic relationship, seeing reality too clearly might actually be a problem. The study he cites showed that couples who hold a slightly delusional belief that their partner is unique, special, and objectively better than everyone else have more stable and satisfying relationships.
And there's actual neuroimaging on this. It's not just survey data.
Yes. They put these people in an fMRI scanner. And when they were shown photos of other objectively attractive people, the parts of their brain involved in assessing attractiveness and reward were less active.
So being in love literally puts blinders on you. It makes other people seem less appealing.
It's a protective biological mechanism. If you are constantly and accurately comparing your partner to every other potential partner on Earth, you'll never be satisfied. A little bit of positive delusion acts as a buffer. It keeps the bond tight and secure.
So go ahead and believe your spouse is the funniest, smartest person in the room, even if, objectively, they aren't. It's actually good for your marriage.
It's biologically adaptive love.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground here. We've gone from butter bones to Stoic philosophy to GLP-1s. Let's try to synthesize this, because it feels like a lot of disparate pieces.
If you zoom out and look at the big picture, the core argument of this entire stack of sources is that resilience is a system. It's an interconnected loop.
It's not just one thing. It's not just mindset.
No, you need the physical structure, the dense bones, the high-quality protein, the mitochondrial energy from things like red light to support the mental work. You can't reframe your identity or microdose bravery if you are so biologically fragile and inflamed that you have constant brain fog.
You can't do the self-affirmation exercise if you don't have the energy to think clearly.
And conversely, you can have a perfect body, a perfect diet, but if you don't have a why, an abstract, portable anchor for your identity, you'll still crumble at the first real crisis.
They are interconnected gears. The body supports the mind directs the body. One can't function optimally without the other.
There's a philosophy that really ties this all together. Amor, Fati.
The love of faith.
We have the story of Lewis Howes in the sources. He was an arena football player. That was his dream, his entire identity.
His what?
His what? And he broke his wrist in a game. Career over. He ended up sleeping on his sister's couch. Broken, completely lost.
But looking back on that time now, he says that tragedy was the single best thing that ever happened to him.
Because it forced him, out of desperation, to develop a whole new set of skills, public speaking, networking, business, emotional vulnerability, that allow him to impact millions of people today through his work. He would not be who he is if he hadn't broken that wrist.
That is Amor Fati. Not just accepting the obstacle, but loving it. Trusting that the obstacle isn't just in the way, it is the way.
It's the ultimate cognitive reframe. It turns every crisis into an opportunity.
I want to leave the listener with one final and, I think, very provocative thought. It comes from Dr. Mindy Pelz. It's a challenge, really.
The isolation shell?
Yes. After the LA fires burned down her neighborhood, she was in a state of deep trauma. And she realized she was living her life entirely for other people, her kids, her husband, her patients. So she did something radical. She moved into an Airbnb by herself for 4 months.
4 months of solitude, no family, no job obligations, just her.
And she used that time to ask herself the most basic questions. Questions we almost never ask because we are so conditioned by our routines and by society.
Questions like what?
Questions like, Do I actually like breakfast?
It sounds so trivial.
But is it? Think about it. Do you eat breakfast because you're genuinely hungry in the morning, or because you've been told your entire life that it's the most important meal of the day? Do you go to sleep at 11 p.m. because you're tired, or because that's just when adults are supposed to go to sleep?
She realized she didn't know her own biological rhythm anymore. She had to strip away all the external noise to hear her own internal signal again.
So that's the challenge for you, the listener. You don't have to move to an Airbnb for 4 months. But can you find an hour? Can you find a weekend? To be truly alone with no inputs, to ask yourself, is this habit mine? Or is it just a trauma response? Is it just social conditioning?
Real resilience, the kind that lasts, has to start with knowing the truth about yourself. Everything else, the jumping, the protein, the philosophy, it all builds on that fundamental truth.
And on that note, check your protein intake, jump 20 times, and maybe go have a conversation with the dead. Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.